thank you. Well, lots of thanks, actually, to all my fellow skeptical inquirers. Skeptical inquirers over here. 2. And skeptical inquirers. No, okay, I'll stop that. No, well, I mean, again, big thanks. Thanks for the introduction, Jim. Thanks to Barry for inviting me to come over and talk to you all. It's lovely to be here. And yes, I have the book out, and will be selling copies and signing them, hopefully, later. It's a book I've been wanting to write for a very long time. I realised I had a kind of book launch in London, and I realised I'd written the original proposal back in 2010. And then the day job just kept getting in the way. I could not find the time. But then I retired in 2020, finally had the time to finish it, and it is now done. And it's basically a popular science book on anomalistic psychology, which I taught for many, many years at Goldsmiths. And that immediately raises the question, which I think Jim was hinting at there, what the hell is anomalistic psychology? Well, I mean, the science of weird shit is a lot more concise, but if you want a more formal, wordy definition, anomalistic psychology may be defined as the study of extraordinary phenomena of behaviour and experience, including, but not restricted to, those which are often labelled paranormal. It's directed towards understanding bizarre experiences that many people have without assuming a priori that there is anything paranormal involved. It entails attempting to explain paranormal and related beliefs and ostensibly paranormal experiences in terms of known or knowable psychological and physical factors. So as you can see from that definition, it's a skeptical approach to the paranormal. Our working hypothesis is to say, let's assume that paranormal phenomena don't really exist. And what I mean by that is, by the word paranormal, things that cannot be explained in terms of currently accepted conventional scientific concepts. Let's assume they don't exist. Can we explain the weird experiences that people definitely do have in other terms, typically psychological terms? And so most of the research that we've done over the decades has been of that nature. And I did a talk for the Skeptical Inquirer, Presents series, which was focused on that side of our research. But that's not what I'm going to be talking to you about today. I've heard lots of speakers refer to the fact that it's important as a skeptic to be open to the possibility that you might be wrong. You might have to revise your opinions in the light of new evidence. And that, I think, is really, really important. And so, in that spirit, we had a lesser strand of research where we would directly test paranormal claims. And there's a couple of chapters in the book that deal with some of the tests that we've done over the decades. Obviously, in a short talk like I've got today, I can just give you a few examples. Please do not expect too many positive, significant results, because you're not going to get them. Right. But again, just to illustrate the kind of range, the variety, I'm just going to give you a few examples. So that's what the rest of the talk is going to consist of. Okay, we'll start with this guy. This is Derek Ogilvie, whose career was riding high back in 2006. He's the self-styled baby mind reader. His USP, his unique selling point as a psychic, he claims he can read the minds of babies, children, toddlers. Even before the babies have learned to talk, he can read their minds. And as you can see, he had his own series. He was doing very well in 2006. He had his own series on Channel 5 in the UK. Channel 5 is the only channel that's named after its number of viewers. And if you ever watched this program, you would see him doing his readings. Now, you might think, well, what's a baby going to be thinking about other than I'm hungry or oops, I've just pooed myself? I mean, what else is there going to be? Well, according to Derek, they knew all sorts of stuff about the state of the family business, about repairs that needed doing around the house, the state of the family car. Incredible stuff, yeah. Anyway, that was 2006. Come 2007, and somebody at Channel 5 had heard about Randy's $1 million challenge. I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but Randy had $1 million on offer for anybody who could demonstrate psychic ability under properly controlled conditions. And somebody at Channel 5 had decided this would make a really interesting documentary. Derek can go for the $1 million challenge. Hence, they made another program, the $1 Million Mind Reader. And not only were they sending Derek Ogilvie over to Florida to be tested by James Randi, they also asked us at the APRU if we would test Ogilvie before he went over to Florida. And we said, yes, of course. So this was myself and my postgrad at the time, Chrissy Wilson. Both agreed, he could be tested by us and then tested by Randy. So just to be absolutely clear, if he passed Randy's test, he would receive a cool $1 million. If he passed our test, he would receive a nice cup of tea and a biscuit. Okay? Now, obviously, if you ever watched him on his TV series, when he did the readings, he would do the readings with the parents present, and they're reacting to what he's saying and so on and so forth. And so you couldn't rule out the possibility that it might just be cold reading, either intentional or maybe even unintentional. But that was the problem with it from a skeptic's point of view. And so obviously we had to come up with tests that would rule out the possibility of cold reading. I'll tell you what we actually did. For the APRU test, we got him to come in and do 6 readings for 6 children aged between 15 and 30 months, but without the parents present. We did have a registered childminder present, and obviously this is all being filmed for a TV documentary, so that was all good. And then the next day, we invited the parents to come back, and we said, here are the 6 readings that were done yesterday. Can you pick out the one that was done for your child? Now, clearly, if Derek can do what he says he can do, there ought to be one reading there that stood out as having lots of specific, accurate detail about that family. So that was the basic setup. We weren't asking for a perfect performance. We said if 4 or more parents chose the correct reading, that would be sufficient to pass the test. You not only get shit in my you also get piss. Sorry, I just realised that now. As I was told that as Ogilvie was being driven down to Goldsmiths to be tested, and he found out what the test was going to be, he said, "That's a piece of piss." That's a charming British expression. It means easy peasy, okay? He was saying basically, I'm going to sail through this. So one interesting thing happened while he was doing the test. He departed from his instructions, and instead of doing the reading for the child, he started doing the reading for the childminder. And she was really quite impressed by what he was doing. But again, it didn't rule out cold reading. So how did he do on the actual test? Well, before I do that, I'll give you an example. This is just an extract from the reading he did for a 2.5-year-old girl. He says, "The child was telling me about a car. The following could be associated with 1 or 2 cars. One car has or had a wheel or tyre problem on the front driver's side. This is associated with a dark colour car. There's also a scratch or sticker on this car on the lower part of the windscreen on the driver's side." She's obviously got an eye for detail, this girl. "There's also been problems with that car with the rear driver's side, tyre and a brake problem. On the inside of the passenger seat, there's a mark or tear beside the handbrake. A door handle doesn't seem to be working all that well either. There's also a noisy exhaust. The child mentioned that there's an issue with getting a car into first gear with a parent." This is amazing. She's 2.5, Incredible. I should mention, I don't know whether it's relevant or not, that Derek himself was really into cars. I don't know if that's relevant, but I'll just throw it out there. So how did he actually do? Well, only one parent chose the correct reading. That's exactly what you'd expect by chance. And afterwards, he was in floods of tears. He was crying his eyes out, literally. He was saying, "That's it, my career's over now." And I'm there saying, "Don't be silly. Your fans won't take any notice of us. Your career's fine." And indeed it is. He is still a successful psychic. He's now living in the Netherlands. He's still going, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, he was then flown over to be tested by the late, great James Randi. I won't describe that test for you, but suffice it to say he failed that one dismally as well. And I remember watching the programme and thinking, oh, they've done a really nice job, actually. It's been really clear. But obviously, just at the very end, I guess they felt they had to throw out a crumb of hope and comfort for the believers. And so they rigged Derek up to an EEG machine to measure his brain waves, and it was solemnly announced that he had very unusual brain waves. As if this in some way showed that he was psychic, which of course it doesn't. But, you know, I guess they felt they had to do that. Anyway, the next example I'm going to give you was when I was invited to test a magnet man for a national newspaper. I say newspaper, it was The Sun, but anyway. Maybe my hopes were too high, I don't know. I kind of, you know, thought I might kind of get somebody who was going to be throwing tanks and armoured cars around and stuff, but no, I got this guy. This is Oral Relianu from Eastern Europe, and I'll show you some of the stuff that he could do.
Gata.
Asta nu e spectaculos cu lingurile.
Păi punem cu farfurii după aia dacă e. Ia, luați mâinile.
Asta deja e bun.
Are you impressed? I'll bet you're impressed. Okay, maybe you're not impressed. Okay, we'll move on.
Gata.
This is a bit more impressive now. Let's see. Watch this one.
Așa, puteți puneți acum? Să le puneți.
Gata?
Să-mi povestiți în timpul ăsta, vă uitați la mine.
I think maybe Magneto, shouldn't have called it, he's more kind of Iron Man than Magneto, really. Thank you. Iron Man, is it Iron Man? No, right. Anyway, whatever he's doing here, this is a bit more impressive. It's not a video this time, but he's got a television stuck to his chest. Now, come on, not everybody could do that. Whatever he is doing, it doesn't involve anything that a physicist would describe as magnetism, because, look, he can do it with big wooden planks as well. Anyway, I was invited in to investigate. Here I am. This is me. I've got a compass there in my hand, and guess what? The needle didn't fluctuate. It was at this point that I kind of wondered, had my ambition to become a respected academic maybe taken the wrong turn? I wasn't sure. I mean, again, I'm sure you've heard of these kind of cases before. The explanation is fairly obvious. You notice he's got a very smooth chest, hairless chest. So if it's a little bit sweaty, then things will stick to it, including if you lean back a bit, even quite heavy objects. It's just physics. I mean, another thing you could do is, instead of putting the spoons directly on his chest, just put a tissue, thin tissue on his chest, and try and stick the spoon on then. And of course, it won't stick, it'll just drop to the floor. So, yeah, that's another one. I'm going to show you a clip now from a documentary that was presented by Richard Dawkins. This was called Enemies of Reason. This was a test of dowsers that we did for the programme. I'll show you the clip and then make one or two comments on it.
Alleged paranormal effects. The so-called evidence for psychic phenomena is not robust, but will-o'-the-wisp. The more we look at it, the weaker it becomes. The alleged detection of water through dowsing is not obviously ridiculous. It might work, but does it? The only way to tell is through a rigorous experiment.
How does dowsing work? That's the #1 question, and nobody can answer you. Well, I reckon I'm convinced that something is helping me to dowse. One of the earlier chaps thinks it's God.
How do you do it then? What's your principle of dowsing?
I think the question, and I expect God to respond in a way that I understand. I'm going to expect the right-hand one to point to the camera and the left-hand one straight forward.
Yeah, okay.
Look, it's following round.
Yeah. And have you done the test yet in the tent?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and what was the result?
I was going to get 6 right, 100%.
Yeah, and what happened?
1.
So what do you make of that then?
He's having his laugh, isn't he? He loves a joke.
Yes.
You don't realise.
Do I get second goes at it?
Oh, yeah, you can have as many...
The psychologist Chris French thinks there may be a simpler explanation. He has devoted his career to investigating claims of the paranormal. And now he has set up this test for dowsing, a properly controlled double-blind trial. In each of these rows, just one container, chosen at random, holds a bottle of water. All the rest contain sand. Neither the dowsers nor the tester are allowed to know where the water is until the boxes are opened. So there are no unintentional giveaways.
Have another go.
Safeguards like this make the double-blind trial one of the crowning achievements of scientific reason.
Okay, put it on the end one then.
Number
It's on
6 again.
I'd say so.
Okay. Right. What you'll typically find when you talk to dowsers is they'll give you lots and lots of anecdotal evidence, lots of stories about how they discovered a leak in their neighbour's pipes and so on and so forth. But there are always other possible explanations there.
Yes.
What we're trying to do is set up conditions which would rule out any of those other explanations. But then we get down to the very fundamental, basic issue: can the dowsers actually do what they think they can do?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's 4. No, I think it's 4.
So shall we see how well you've done? This is actually sand.
In that case, I can't do this.
This is the waters in number 5. Sand again. This time, guess was bin number 3. And this time you're correct. That's water. And that's sand.
Yes, we've actually got 2 possible ones.
Final trial, it's sand again, I'm afraid.
In that case, I'm 100% wrong again.
Well, you got 1 right out of 6, which is what we'd expect by chance. So far, they're performing pretty much in line with mean chance expectation. In other words, guesswork.
Yeah.
So no one has scored more than 2 hits out of 6.
3.
3.
The people you've been testing, do they understand why they're being put through the double-blind procedure?
I think once we've explained it to them, then they appreciate why someone who is perhaps sceptical or doubtful about their claims would see that that was necessary. What's interesting is it doesn't actually tend to dent their confidence at all.
Which suggests that they're completely sincere.
I think they are completely sincere.
Yes.
And that they're typically very, very surprised when we run them through a series of trials and actually say at the end of the day, well, your performance is no better than we'd expect just on the basis of guesswork. And then what typically happens is they'll make up all kinds of reasons, some might say excuses, as to why they didn't pass that particular test.
I feel the whole test is wrong.
I'm shocked beyond words that this has happened. But I did say from the outset, couldn't we just sort out some grey blocks and some scaffold boards so that I can walk above it, which is what I would routinely do and I've done for 40 years.
Who knows where or what bottles were in what tubs.
That's the whole
through
point,
the
isn't
thing.
it? That's the whole point.
But if you understand dowsing like I do, you'll understand that everything leaves an image.
This state of denial is extraordinary. Even when confronted with hard fact, these dowsers prefer not to face up to truth, but retain their delusion.
I should just say that Ken Negus there that you saw, the one who said it's guard in his that lovely West Country accent, we fell in love with Ken. He was so lovely. We all said that if he ever formed a cult, we would join. I mean, no question. He was just such a lovely guy. Anyway, we were very generally quite happy with the way they edited our contribution to the programme, but they missed out something which was it was a shame. I thought it was quite important because before we did the formal double-blind trials, which is what you've just seen, we did what we called open trials with our dowsers. We said we want to make sure that the conditions are fair on you, so let's make sure you get the reaction you expect from your dowsing rods. So here's a bottle of water, here's a bottle of sand, pass your dowsing rods over them and see what happens. And over the water, the dowsing rods would cross, which is what they would expect. And over the sand, nothing. That's great. Let's make sure it still happens when we put the bottles inside containers. So water in this container, lid down. Sand in this container, lid down. They'd pass the dowsing rods over the container that they knew contains water, and the dowsing rods would cross. Over the one that contains sand, nothing. Fantastic. Let's go and do the double-blind test. Do the double-blind test, and their performance falls to chance. What is it that explains why the dowsing rods cross when they know what the answer is? I'm sure you're all aware of it. It's the ideomotor effect, which is a posh way of saying they are moving the dowsing rods themselves without being consciously aware of it. It's the same explanation applies to Ouija boards, etc. So just one more example. If you went to Richard Saunders' talk yesterday on psychic detectives, well, here's another one you can add to your collection. This is Chris Robinson, the so-called, well, self-styled dream detective. Chris claimed that his dreams foretold the future. Typically, we're talking about foretelling things like disasters, terrorist attacks, etc., etc. And Chris would say that sometimes his dreams would be a literal representation of what would happen in the future, and sometimes it would be a symbolic representation. But to be fair to Chris, the symbolism was always consistent. He didn't kind of, try and change that. So, for example, he was very active at the time when the IRA were letting off lots of bombs on in the UK, and he had a real thing about the IRA. If he dreamt about snow falling, that meant a terrorist attack was imminent. If he dreamt about dogs represented IRA terrorists, and so on. Now, the usual problem that you have when you're trying to investigate somebody who claims that their dreams foretell the future, the big problem you have is that typically they don't know when the stuff they dream about is going to happen. So it might be the following week, or it might be in 20 years' time. So obviously that makes it incredibly difficult to actually put to the test. The big thing here was that Chris claimed that he could have dreams to order, so to speak. So if you were to say, we're going to take you to a mystery location next Saturday, he would keep his dream diary, because this is how he operated. Every time he woke up, he wrote down in great detail what he'd been dreaming about. He would keep his dream diaries for a week, and then when you took him to the mystery location on the following Saturday, he would claim that the location, there'd be lots of things there that corresponded to the contents of his dreams. He was the subject of another program on Channel 5. I shouldn't knock them so much, because actually they paid my mortgage for a long time. So, yeah. Chris had been tested by this guy, Professor Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona, with their booze there. and Gary Schwartz had been very impressed. They'd done it the way I just described, where Chris kept his dream diary, was then taken to a mystery location, and they found lots of correspondences between the contents of the dream diary and the location that he'd been taken to. Again, there's a problem here. It doesn't take into account what we call subjective validation. Subjective validation refers to a situation where if you expect there to be a correspondence between this very rich stimulus here and this very rich stimulus here, you can often find them, but are they just coincidental correspondences? And so obviously in this case, we've got Chris's dream diary full of lots and lots of detail, and we've got these interesting mystery locations. So, oh yeah, I talked about a triangle, and look, there's a building over there that's triangular. And I talked about water, and look, there's water over there. Well, yeah, it's very difficult to know just how impressed we should be. So we wanted to come up with a more objective way of looking at this. What we came up with was the idea that somebody, a third party, would come up with a pool of 6 potential targets, all locations that were very different from each other. Somebody who knew how Chris operated knew that sometimes the dreams were literal representations, sometimes it was symbolic, and so on. Chris would keep his dream diary for a week, and then that person would interview him, get any clarification that was needed on the contents of the dream diary, and then that person would make the judgment about what was the best match from amongst the 6 potential targets. And it's only at that point that we actually decide what the actual target's going to be by randomly selecting one, by just rolling a dice. Now, if that corresponds to the target, the location, that's been chosen, then there's one chance in 6 of that happening just by chance. So if you have 3 trials like that, and he gets hits on all 3, it's 1 chance in 6 times 6 times 6. So that would be impressive. We also, to be fair to Chris, we thought it's got to be somebody who wants Chris to pass the test, who is this objective third person, this person who's going to make the selection, and we let him choose that person. He chose the person who was making the documentary. You know, it would obviously be much more impressive from her point of view if Chris passes the test. And so that's what we did. So how did he do? This is an extract from trial 1. There was a lot more information in his dream diary, but this is just an extract. Paint, white sheets painted all white. In the dream, it wasn't my house. It was a person I know when I went to school who was an artist. He could paint and draw anything. So painting is like a key word, if you like. You've got to choose from your pool of places which one you think that little lot matches the best. Now, it just so happened that Leslie Caton, the person doing the program, had this in her target pool, the House of Dreams. This is a house where an artist lives. He puts all his artwork up on the walls and the public can come in and look around. So this seemed like a perfect match. So she's made that decision. She then we roll the dice, and the actual target that was selected was this place, the ice bar. This is a bar made entirely of ice, as the name suggests. So now the thing is, we knew at this point that he'd failed on this trial, but the rationale of the experiment meant that we still had to take him to this target location. So even though we know he's failed, we've got to take him there. And also he insisted that when he's taken to the target locations, he is blindfolded so that he doesn't pick up information on the way there that might contaminate his dreams. So it's quite interesting that when you roll up in a taxi outside a bar with a blindfolded man, you get him out, you walk him along the street into the bar. In London, nobody bats an eyelid. You know, it's just, so anyway, he's failed the first round. He tried to claim that this was a match. He said, oh, well, I said lots of white and so on, and look, it's like snow. Well, it's not like snow. No, it's ice. You can see through it. It's grey walls. No, not a hit. Anyway, the next one, trial 2, this was an observer dream, as I'm watching other people. It's not as if I'm part of it, and I'm rolling or unrolling something. That could be, if you're in a printing works, it could be rolls of paper. Somebody's now made a pie, so it could have been pastry. And then we put this pie in the oven, and there was a joke about not putting the oven on for too long so you don't burn it. And I see these faces of people go past me. Now, this was much more difficult for Leslie to find anything she thought really matched. There wasn't anything obvious. But there was reference there to printing works, rolls of paper, and one of the potential targets in the pool of 6 was this place, St. Bride's Crypt. St. Bride's Church in London has a long historical association with newspapers and printing and so on, so she went for this. Anyway, we then selected what the actual target was going to be, and this time it was a city farm. So this time, not only do I have to walk this blindfolded guy down the path, for the purposes of the TV programme, I have to actually get him up onto a horse, and then we took the blindfold off, and this time he didn't try and claim it was a hit. So it's two fails so far. Third and final trial. In the dream, I'm in a sort of room, and there are people that are sort of people. And he points to his dream diary, and there in big letters I've put dead. It's in this room. There was actually cups and glasses. Now, cups is always the same. Cups, if I see them, means dead people. And if we don't go where there are dead people, I don't know what that was all about. Now, because he hadn't chosen St. Bride's Crypt on the previous trial, Leslie had left it in the target pool. So this was obviously quite a good match about dead people. And this time we rolled the dice, and he had got it right. So 1 hit out of 3, far from being statistically significant. I think I may have overrun very slightly, but thank you for listening.